In this video, I'm going to install the shelves on the new basement wall. The shelf on the bottom is also the top for the drawers that will run along the bottom of the wall. My first thought was to build cabinet boxes for the drawers, then hang the boxes on the wall and have the bottom shelf sit on top of those cabinet boxes. But as I sketched and sort of simplified what this system could be, I ended up with an idea where I would just make vertical supports for the shelf, and those supports would also hold the drawer slides so that there really aren't any cabinets. There's just the structure for the shelf and the drawers. Because I wasn't going to make boxes, I had to build the system on the wall instead of building boxes first that then just get hung on the wall. I wanted to make a frame that would sit on top of the vertical supports, and that frame would go just underneath the shelf. This is similar to the way cabinetry is done. But instead of putting the vertical supports up first, I would start with this frame that goes on top of the supports. And I could use that to make a line or sort of a datum across the wall that I could then use to put the supports in place with. So I cut the strips for that frame, and I attached the first piece to the wall. I made some legs of the same length, and I jointed a 2x4 to get a very straight line, and I could use that as a support for my first support piece of the frame. So it was all very simple, but it was a lot of little steps to get to the precision that I wanted with this shelf. Now that the first piece of the frame is up, I can make the vertical support pieces. And I'm just going to cut those out of a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. I think they're 14 inches deep and a foot tall, and I needed 8 of them. So I could get all 8 of them out of one strip from the 4x8 sheet of plywood. I did find a use for pocket screws on this project. So I needed to attach the bottom of the vertical support pieces to the wall. And I could attach the top corner to the piece of frame that's on the wall. Then I cut sort of a story stick. It's basically a piece of wood that's going to be the width between each of the vertical support pieces. So I can make that dimension exactly the same. So I can make all of the drawers exactly the same, and they'll fit in the spaces that they're supposed to go in. So I can use that stick between each vertical piece and use that to get them located perfectly. The first few, I put a screw into the vertical piece from behind the wall. But as I was going, that didn't really seem to be that important, so I stopped doing that. I then cut out more of the frame for the top, and these pieces will go on the top of the vertical pieces. They're not super necessary, but they just kind of finish out the frame. Then I can put the shelf in place and see if it's going to fit. One of the things I wanted to do with the shelves was to straighten the wall, as they would be the biggest pieces of structure in this system. And at this point, I hadn't attached the bottom of the wall to the floor yet, so I could straighten the wall out based on the shelf. Then cut the shelves to their final length based on where they were going to go in the basement. This project was a lot of carrying things back and forth between the basement and the shop. And I could do a final sanding. And I was going to need a pocket hole at the outside corner of the vertical pieces. And I wanted to do that before I put the top on. I'm going to bolt the shelf to the wall through the 2x4 blocking that's in the wall. So this will be the structure that holds the shelf to the wall. And it will help straighten the wall out to follow the straightness of the shelf. I made the shelf out of 2 pieces as it was fairly long, so I wanted to make that seam line up. I put biscuits in the seam, and I used pocket screws on the underside of the shelf to pull the joint together. And the biscuits will help align the top of the joint. So I didn't use any glue in the joint, it's just the screws. I had drilled holes through the front, and now I can finish those holes from the back and put the bolts through the wall into the shelf. So where the shelf is, the shelf will be trying to pull away from the wall, so that's where the steel bolts help. And at the vertical supports, the system will be pushing into the wall, so the supports don't need the kind of tensile connection that the shelf does. If I had built my frame that goes under the shelf completely before I attached the shelf to the wall, I'd be building a box truss, basically, and I would be fighting that with the bolts attaching the shelf to the wall if I completed that frame before the shelf was attached. So I didn't want to put this piece in until the shelf was in place. That's what this all comes down to. So I slipped that piece in, then attached the vertical supports to it. And I used the same piece of wood with the same length that I used to attach the vertical pieces to the wall. So hopefully the sides that the drawers will slide against will be parallel. But I won't know that until I make the drawers and put them in. Now that the shelf is in place and holding the wall straight, I can attach the wall to the floor. So I put some steel anchors into the concrete floor. Then we mopped and cleaned the basement floor as best we could, and the carpet came. I needed to get the wall straight and attached to the floor before the carpet showed up so that it would be in its permanent location. So they put the carpet in. They started with the edge strips and then the padding that goes under the carpet. Then the carpet went in. We ended up with one seam through the middle. When we were first laying this out, we were going to have the seam run the other way, but the installer said he could get away with just 2 pieces and 1 seam if we did it this way. It virtually disappears, so you can't even see the seam. Here's a time lapse of the whole process. They did it in 1 day. It was 1 space, but it had a lot of little ins and outs around the edge. And they did the stair too. We went with kind of a dark color. I think it actually works really well with the space. I really don't like light tan colored carpets. Ooh, it's so soft. And everyone was really excited with the new carpet.
Oh, it smells like a carpet store.
Yeah, it's the wrong color.
Should we have done that one?
This is what it looks like installed with the carpet in as well. And the room is starting to look a lot more finished, and things are starting to get exciting. Thanks for watching.